And he's here.
Oh, there you go. Account owner. So he's recording it. Oh, there he is. Hi, yeah.
Oh, you started recording already.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Sonia Hulbert, and I am with the Flathead chapter of the Montana Native Plant Society. And so excited you could all join us today. It's been an amazing, wet, showery spring here in Northwest Montana. We're knocking on wood on that it continues. And the blooms have been beautiful, so I hope you've been getting out and enjoying them. Yeah, if you could please mute yourself. I think we have a small crowd, and Joey, who's going to present for us today, is probably going to run the meeting and let you know when he's good with questions, and it's probably going to be pretty informal. So yeah, thanks for joining us, and thanks to Joey. I'll turn it over to Rachel Potter, who's also with the Flathead chapter, and she's going to introduce our speaker tonight.
Yeah, welcome. Well, Joey sent Carolyn and I an email asking if we'd be interested in hosting him for a program because he's looking for volunteers for this research project. And so many people have really gotten a lot of benefit from citizen science projects, and I think this is somewhere that our members would be interested in joining in. So Dr. Joey Hulbert, he's a postdoctoral research fellow at Washington State University, and he's got support from the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture. His background in forest health started with a BS degree in natural resources from Washington State University. Then he spent 4 years at Oregon State University. It seems like all of the Western botany people end up at Oregon State, working and learning about sudden oak death before traveling to South Africa, where he completed his PhD. And in South Africa, he worked with community science and a program called the Cape Citizen Science, where he engaged communities in research about plant diseases in the Cape Floristic region. So together, these experiences have really prepared him really well to lead the Forest Health Watch. And Joey is going to tell us more about that. But he's looking for more partners and a broader area of people and organizations to engage with and developing the program and coming up with data. So he looks forward to your discussions and feedback, so be thinking of questions. I'll leave it there, and I'll let you introduce the rest, Joey. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. And I can try and come back to these Native Plant Society slides at the end. I realize that there's the second one I am just now posting now.
Oh, that's fine.
Well, let's see. Let me advance to the presentation then. And I'm wondering if any of you actually had trouble getting in. I know that WSU sometimes has difficulty. The links can sometimes redirect people to WSU web pages, which is really confusing. Did anyone have trouble getting onto the Zoom?
No,
okay.
There's no desperation emails from our chapter, in our chapter account. You know, someone's like, oh, help, where I sent the invitation out from. So that's a good sign.
I was also checking my email and I haven't seen any, so I'm happy to hear that. Because it has been a barrier, and sometimes people can't log in, but I'm glad that you all persisted and you tried and you got here. And I'm really grateful that you're all here on this Tuesday night after a really long weekend for some of us. And yeah, I don't think this will be too long. I have quite a lot of photos and things like that, so we should fly through it. I'm going to briefly introduce myself a little bit further. But Rachel, thank you for that thorough introduction, and thank you very much for this opportunity. Wow. I'm seeing a mistake right away. It says Western Hemlock, but clearly it was a long weekend. But we're going to talk about Western red cedar dieback, not Western hemlock dieback. That's another issue. And it actually illustrates that I'm happy to co-develop a project with any of you. If there's a tree health issue or a plant health issue that you're concerned with in Glacier or some of the other regions that you frequent, let's work together and develop a project where we can start capturing some of the data and understand what's going on there. So although I'm talking today about Western red cedar dieback, we are interested. We do have other projects. We're just really focused on red cedar, and I'm going to talk about that a little more. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the Coast Salish lands, the traditional homelands of Coast Salish peoples. I'm actually coming to you right now from Tacoma, Washington, which is the traditional homelands of the Puyallup tribe of Indians. And because today we're talking about a really culturally important species, to the Western red cedar. It's really important for many regions, specifically for the Coast Salish peoples, but I assume also for some of the inland territories and homelands. But maybe not as important as, say, Western white pine for some of the native communities in the region where you occupy. But I just wanted to say that I'm really privileged to get to learn and explore and work and study on these specifically on the traditional homelands of the Puyallup tribe. This tool that I'm referencing is called Native Lands.ca. It's based out of Canada, but you can check this out and explore the territories and the tribes that have kind of existed in the areas that you frequent since time immemorial. For example, you all are very aware, I'm sure, that you're occupying Flathead territory, and this tool is just really neat for exploring that. So I encourage you to check it out. So I'm gonna, again, I'll just introduce myself. We'll talk a little bit about Western red cedar dieback, and then this program that we've created to kind of try and create shared understanding about what's going on. So to reiterate, I actually am from the Northwest. I got my background in forestry at Washington State University, and then went to Oregon State. And then I did a PhD in South Africa. And these experiences really introduced me to tree health, and I studied tree diseases specifically, and disease-causing microbes in a biodiversity hotspot. So I have this appreciation for plant health and for biodiversity conservation. It's really instilled in this working and learning through my graduate degrees. And then gratefully, I returned to the US in February 2020, so a little more than a year ago, from South Africa, just before things started locking down from the pandemic. But I'm really fortunate to begin working and learning at this Research and Extension Center in Puyallup. And this is just a little bit east of Tacoma, Washington, here in kind of the South Puget Sound on the west side of Washington State. And as Rachel had mentioned, that I'm here today, and I'm supported by the USDA through a postdoctoral fellowship provided by the National Institute of Food and Ag. So I just want to acknowledge that there's some really neat opportunities that are provided to us through these programs, and we proposed to them creating the Forest Health Watch program, and they funded it, and we're really grateful to have that support. Look, here I fixed it. It's Western red cedar dieback, as it's supposed to say, instead of Western hemlock dieback. I apologize. So now I'm gonna share a little bit about Western red cedar, and then talk about some of the things we're seeing that are alarming us and driving some concern. And then we'll talk about this program for a few minutes and how we could potentially work together to build this program into something that can be useful to Montana communities as well. But then I'll share kind of how community scientists are contributing already and why it's important and what we're seeing, and how this ties into the greater issue and the effort to find some solutions. So that's kind of outline of where we're going. Western red cedar, I've already mentioned, is really, really important because of the cultural, kind of the role it's played in our cultural heritage. And one difference that we have in the kind of the Puget Sound compared to the inland Northwest is maybe the utility of Western red cedar for transport, where maybe canoe transport and river transport in Montana and Western Montana was probably, those canoes were probably created on Western white pine rather than Western red cedar, but I may be wrong. There's probably some Western red cedar. So at least in the Northwest, we on the western side of Washington, we really acknowledge and recognize the importance of this tree because it's been used for so many different important things by the indigenous peoples in the region. This diagram from Heidi Bohan in her book, People of Cascadia, really illustrates how this tree is used. Like almost every single piece of this tree is useful in some way. And sometimes it's referred to as the generous tree or the tree of generosity because of all the products that it provides. But it's also referred to as the tree of life because from the time that you're born to the time that you die, you're using parts of this tree for survival and fitness. In addition to the cultural importance, we really are concerned and we care a lot about Western red cedar because of the role it's played in our industrial heritage in the Northwest. Cedar shingles were very important for homesteading and building of houses in the Northwest. And cities like Seattle are really born on these industries created around forestry and fishing, of course. But Western red cedar is still really important commercially because it's recognized for its durability and its tolerance to rot, or its resistance to rot and decay. So it's pretty, if you're going to build a raised bed in your garden or a fence and you don't want to stain it or use treated wood, Western red cedar is kind of the species that people use for those conditions. Western red cedar is also really important ecologically. In addition to carbon sequestration, it's also playing some important roles in terms of nutrient cycling and water air filtration. Again, in the Puget Sound region, we really recognize its importance for maintaining stream habitat, stream temperature for salmon habitat. And in some cases, you can find entirely pure stands of Western red cedar over here, although it's generally mixed a lot with other species like hemlock and where you are, it's probably mixed with Western white pine and probably more limited to the wetter areas of say Glacier and some of the other Western Montana habitats. It's also really important for bird habitats. And we have a project on iNaturalist where we're trying to document species that use Western red cedar kind of when it's healthy, and then which bird species use it when it's unhealthy or when it's dying. And we're seeing things like barred owl and some other neat bird species that really rely or at least visit Western red cedar trees. It's pretty cool. In terms of our urban areas, Western red cedar is also really important. And I recognize that this is really Seattle specific, but it's kind of the only data set that we've really explored where when you look at the street trees that are mapped in Seattle alone, we have almost 2,000 Western red cedar trees. So you can just imagine how important this species is to our communities, where it's contributing to things like reducing the heat island effects or improving, the well-being of our people and the locals that live in Seattle. And it'd be interesting to look and see if Missoula or some of the other cities have this data. Western red cedar is planted as an ornamental in some areas, like it's even planted in Europe in places. So in cities and urban environments, you might find more Western red cedar than you would in natural areas in some parts of Montana at least. And just to illustrate that further, if you want to explore a little bit more about kind of the role of Western red cedar in an urban landscape, we have a kind of a storyboard about its importance in Seattle at this URL. But in addition to its distribution in our urban environments, Western red cedar has a pretty big footprint in the Northwest. And what's really neat is to see how it extends into Western Montana. But we really have almost no understanding of how healthy these trees are and these populations over in Montana. Our understanding of what's going on in Idaho is very limited. Our understanding of what's happening on Eastern Washington is also really limited. So that's why it's really important that we engage with folks like yourselves and communities in Western Montana, because we want to understand, are those trees still healthy? Or are they also in poor shape like what we're seeing? This data here is just where people have observed it using iNaturalist. So folks are recording the presence of Western red cedar on iNaturalist in Western Montana. We could almost use those points as like a point. If you're looking for a place to go hiking this weekend, maybe go hike towards an area where other people have documented that there are Western red cedar, and let us know if they're healthy or not. So Western red cedar is really important. One, because of its role in our cultural legacy in the Northwest. Also because of its industrial heritage, its role in our industrial heritage. But it provides a lot of ecological services. Thinking about the enormous footprint and the amount of carbon that's being stored every year is one good reason to think about or to recognize why this tree is important. But not only is it important in just natural areas, but also in urban areas, especially where we're starting to feel the effects of climate change on our populations and really need relief and resiliency through urban forests and things like reducing the heat island effects with shading by trees. But Western red cedar also has that really robust distribution. So it's pretty important to understand what's going on. Is what's affecting it going to affect the whole distribution? Or is the whole distribution being affected and maybe it's futile to try and move populations from the south to north? These are questions that we don't have answers to yet. So Western red cedar is really important, but we have this concern emerging because we're starting to see a lot of dieback. And so sometimes we see trees that are entirely dead, a mature tree that just dies in a forest. Sometimes we see these trees that have very thin canopies. So you can see through the trees extra, like more than you should be able to see through it. This red cedar compared to this red cedar is extra see-through, or it's extra transparent. Sometimes we'll just see the top dieback, and then every year it will kind of extend and the whole tree will eventually die. We don't have a good understanding of like how quickly that happens. So we're hoping that with some repeat photography, we might be able to tease that out. Occasionally it's a small tree that dies. And sometimes it can be in the middle of a field, or other times it's in the middle of a forest. To illustrate this a little further, I'm just going to share some observations that community scientists have shared with us. So these are trees that have been observed in Portland, Oregon. These are more local to Seattle and the, kind of the west side of Washington. Similar with these span from Olympia, Washington, up to Bellingham, Washington. This is on Vancouver Island in Canada, and these are from Vancouver and British Columbia. So what we're really illustrating is there's a lot of top dieback. We see this thinning crowns, or this top dieback, and we're seeing it from Portland all the way to British Columbia. But again, we don't really have a good understanding of what's going on in Western Montana. This has also been noted by a lot of news sources, particularly in British Columbia, like Parksville, where they're looking for ways to manage the dying red cedars. But science is really behind. We don't have the information to help manage this issue yet. We really need more information and more observations to start picking out patterns and making progress to find solutions. And I'm going to talk about that a little more. But there's a lot of news news articles out there about this concern, and the concern is really growing. Every year, Washington Department of Natural Resources and the U.S. Forest Service, they fly airplanes over our state. I'm assuming they do this in Montana, and probably Idaho. I just haven't looked for that data yet. But in Washington, if we look at the data every year, in 2017, they started mapping where they're seeing dieback of redcedar. And then every year since then, they start to see more and more. And so generally the consensus is that this is linked to longer and hotter droughts that we're experiencing. And I'm assuming that that's also affecting Western Montana, although admittedly I haven't quite looked at the recent events in Montana. I welcome you to kind of comment if they're in chat, if you experience longer and hotter droughts in the past years. Like really in Western Washington, it kind of all started for us in 2015 when we had a really, really hot summer and it really dry spring. So by August, the trees were in pretty bad shape. But generally what's happening, we don't know, exactly what's going on. There's a consensus that the longer and hotter droughts are driving this dieback, and it's certainly having an effect, but there's other things to consider as well, like this interaction between plants and say a root disease pathogen. And this triangle is really just a simplified way to illustrate that there's a lot of interactions going on, and as the environment changes, these host pathogen interactions also change. So it's one thing to consider. Are we seeing this top dieback of Western red cedar purely as a result of changes in the environment, or are they kind of constantly under pressure from a root disease or some other pathogen that's contributing to their health, but they're able to tolerate or resist in good conditions, and then when they become more water stressed, are they succumbing to these other diseases or these other pathogens that they've generally been resistant to for throughout their evolution. So these are just some examples of some pathogens to consider. Occasionally we'll see armillaria, which is a fungus, a root rot fungus that Western red cedar is generally thought to be tolerant towards, but it may be causing more of an issue now that trees become more water stressed with drought. These other examples, this is just Phaeolus rhinetii. I'm not sure if it's actually a pathogen of Western red cedar, but looking for fungi at the base of red cedars is an important thing to consider, just in case there's other contributing factors that we aren't aware of yet. So generally what we're seeing is this change in the environment, but we don't know how it's affecting the interaction with other organisms. In addition, part of this concern that we have for Western red cedar is one, there's a growing concern because we're seeing a lot of healthy trees die, a lot of mature, large trees die. Two, there's a lot of factors that could be involved and we don't quite know what's going on. But also we're concerned because there's a lot of urgency and there's a lot of decisions that are already being made about whether to replant red cedar or whether to plant other species and what should we do. And this is really where the science is behind the answers. We don't have good suggestions for these kind of questions yet. And so individuals have indicated that they've chosen other trees to plant. And this is really a concern and an urgent concern because we know how important Western red cedar is to our cultures and to our historical legacy. So we want to ensure that Western red cedar is there for our future generations. And the best approach to get this information in a timely manner and address this urgency is really through a community approach. And so that's why we created a community science project around this issue. And so we, as I mentioned, the U.S. Forest Service, or the USDA, funded a project proposal to start this Forest Health Watch program. And I encourage you to check out our website, foresthealth.org, if you're interested in getting more involved in any capacity. There's a lot of resources and information on there about climate change and forest health, and a lot of places to share your perspective. I would love to hear more of your perspectives. It's really important to us to know, is this tree important to you? And, is this a good approach? Is this a feasible approach? What groups should we be engaging with? Those kind of questions and perspectives are really important. So far, this program has been shaped by a lot of different kind of partners, mostly state and local agencies and municipalities, but some really great university collaborations and nonprofits as well as out here. But please, if you're connected or you think there's another group that I should be talking to, or that would be interested in contributing to this kind of effort to create a shared understanding, let me know. I would love to reach out to more groups. I do want to I'm not going to go through all of these. These are some of the resources that the Forest Health Watch provides and creates. One is like a listserv where folks can come and bounce ideas off each other. We also have this office hours. So every month there's time dedicated to certain subjects. Like on Friday, this Friday we have office hours for how to use iNaturalist. So if you're interested in learning more, or if you're having trouble about how to use iNaturalist, you can come to one of our community office hours, and we're there to help kind of troubleshoot those issues. We also do research updates every month. And so these updates, we look at the community science data, and we talk about some of the patterns that are emerging, and we discuss kind of ways to improve what we're doing in these research updates. And these happen every month. We also have just started a biosurveillance training. So kind of like I was illustrating earlier, here's some fungi to look out for and take note of. We'll do these biosurveillance trainings where you can learn to look for invasive and exotic forest pests and pathogens, and just things to keep an eye out for if you're interested in watching for the health of trees. So finally, just to illustrate a little more, we are always looking for more partners and collaborators, and I'd really love to hear your perspectives and have your help in shaping this program into something meaningful and useful. It doesn't have to be limited to the West Side. It's just, most of our engagements around Western Washington because that's where we're based. But again, reiterate, if there's a concern in Western Montana with a tree health issue, and you think it would be useful to start collecting observations or documenting where that's occurring, then we're happy to support that and work with you to create a project that we can document that stuff with. We can shape this program into something bigger. There's also a lot of tree species like Redcedar and Western hemlock that have these giant footprints and really need a regional approach to understand what's going on and to watch. We're also, always looking for communities to engage. I've mentioned this a couple of times, but if you have volunteers at the national park, or if there's a youth corps that does environmental education, we're happy to engage with these kind of communities and not only just recruit or extract and get them to collect data, but to also provide some sort of education and empowerment. So, there's really two objectives of the Forest Health Watch program. So that's all I'm going to say about that program. I'm going to shift a little bit and start talking about how community scientists are contributing to the project. I do welcome you to start. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Otherwise, we should be wrapping up in the next few minutes, and then we can we can have a broader discussion. But I would love to hear what you all are thinking, and whether you have any questions. So as part of the Forest Health Watch program, we created a project. This is our pilot project, and really the focus of the program at this time. And we created a project on iNaturalist. And so iNaturalist is an open tool. It's a really nice smartphone application, but you can also just use it on your computer. You don't have to have a mobile phone to use it. Generally, you take a picture, you upload it, and you share it on iNaturalist, and the community will help you identify what you saw. But that point will also be recorded if you give it permission, so that it goes into a big database that researchers can use. So we co-developed this project with some partners in state and federal agencies who are also really concerned with the Western Red Cedar dieback map. And they created a similar project on Survey 123, which is ArcMap software that you have to have licenses to use, but they created this project for folks within the agencies to use. And so we worked with them to create an iNaturalist project that's very similar and complements what they're doing, so that the data that we're collecting is also useful to our partners. So why do we choose iNaturalist? I mentioned it's pretty neat tool. It's already open. It's developed by California Academy of Sciences and National Geographic, and it's a nice application that's going to be updated every time your phone updates, and it's really stable, and they figured out it's always improving, but the baseline is there. And what's great about iNaturalist is there's already millions of people using it. So there's a great community of people already using this tool. But for example, if you type in Western Red Cedar, as I showed earlier, it'll show you the distribution of where people have observed it. So it's pretty powerful for exploring data at this point. But we also used it because of the flexibility to create a bunch of different projects. So we've seen that we also have a project about Western hemlock dieback. We're interested, we're hearing a lot of reports about Douglas fir trees with top dieback. So we're trying to document that as well. Grand fir, red alder, big leaf maple. 2 weeks ago, we were giving a similar presentation, and someone asked us to create a project around incense cedar, where they're seeing a lot of dieback with incense cedar, another cedar, if you will, not a true cedar, but another cedar, and they're seeing a lot of dieback around Eugene, Oregon. So we created a project with them for that. So anyway, there's just some utility, and I'm happy to work with you or promote iNaturalist if it would be helpful, and give more of a robust training on it if it would be helpful. But generally how it works is you share an observation of any organism, and the community helps you identify what it is. And you might find a really, really rare salamander or some other interesting organism, and then the community might react and say, wow, where did you see this? We had, there's a story in the peninsula of Washington where they did find a rare salamander, and the Washington Fish and Wildlife followed up with them to go and monitor more closely, where they saw that the salamander was rare and what they thought was extinct salamander. So there's some neat engagement that comes from sharing your observations, and it might not even be planned. But in addition to this, you can also create projects, and you can share specific observations with specific projects. And so we created a project called the Western Red Cedar dieback map to start documenting where folks are seeing unhealthy and healthy red cedars. So generally how it works is one person would join the project on iNaturalist. Then when you are adding an observation of a red cedar, you can tag the project. You can say, this observation is part of this project. And when you tag this project, the Western Red Cedar dieback map, it asks some other questions. It asks you, what tree symptoms did you see? Was the tree very thin, as we discussed earlier, and very easy to see through? Or was the top completely dying back? Or was the tree completely dead? It also asks you about the site. Was the tree right next to a road? Or was it in the middle of a field? Or is it in the middle of a forest? And then finally, as we alluded a little bit earlier, it wants to know, are there any other possible factors that might explain why that tree is dying? For example, is there fungus colonizing the tree? Or is there holes, insect holes, evidence of a wood borer, or galleries that are evidence of a bark beetle? All of these things are probably contributing to the health. And what we're interested in doing is picking out the patterns. Are trees with these wood boring holes more likely to have trees with top dieback, right? Are trees that are in really bad shape, is there any other factors, or if there's no other factors, then we can be more confident that it's more related to drought and other abiotic factors. It also asks you, like, is it covered in an invasive species? Is there a blackberry or English ivy that's covering that tree? It asks, was it hit? Is there mechanical damage? Did someone hit it with a lawnmower, or some logging machinery? Those kind of questions, right? Again, just illustrating to take a look and see if there's other factors that might be contributing. This is what we call insect frass. It's another indicator that there's an insect that has bored into the tree. It's essentially the excrement from a beetle feeding on wood. And it can be good evidence that there's an insect in that tree. These galleries are really cool. These are cedar bark beetle galleries. Basically, based on the pattern of the gallery, you can identify what bark beetle you're dealing with. And it's usually really species specific, but it's interesting to document, and we don't really know. Maybe there is a new bark beetle on Western Red Cedar in Western Montana, and you might be the first to note it, and then that will stimulate a lot more research. So these bark beetles they're pretty cute little organisms, but they can have pretty dramatic effects on forests. With Western Red Cedar, they're typically thought to be secondary, so they only come in after a tree is really stressed or unhealthy. But still, we haven't been able to tease that out yet. Also, at least in Seattle, we're seeing this other fungus, this Conophoria species. Not sure too much about what is going on, but at least in Seattle, we're starting to see some of these observations. So we need to do a little more research on this. And I just wanted to highlight this in case you happen to see this kind of fungus growing on the red cedar. And what's interesting is, especially it's interesting if the tree's still alive and you see the fungus, then it might be indicating that it's contributing to the tree health. Whereas if the tree's already dead, and then you see the fungus or the insects, it's quite possible that it's just a saprophyte and it's coming in to live off the dead material. So anyway, we have a project on iNaturalist that you all can contribute to if you're interested and willing. What's neat is we're really starting to see this distribution of where trees are healthy and where they're unhealthy. But again, our understanding of what's going on in the inland Northwest, where you all are, is really, really poor. And so it would be super helpful to know how healthy are the trees out there. We also have this visualization that updates every day, updates once a day, where it's on our webpage. If you type in analyses, foresthealth.org/analyses, you can go and see kind of what's happening day to day. So, and you can explore, you can look and see this individual has collected almost 100 observations around Portland. Pretty amazing individual, Alexis. Radu, similarly, up along Vancouver. So anyway, you can go and explore this. But I do want to highlight that our goal this year is to reach 2021 observations, just because that's the ballpark for when we expect we'll have enough information or enough observations that we can actually start to see some patterns emerge and make some suggestions or understanding with strong confidence. So we're a little more than 30% of the way for our goal this year. There's also a little bit, you can also explore kind of what's going on with the tree health. So you'll see that most of our observations so far are healthy trees, which is awesome. And they're kind of scattered everywhere. So it's good to keep track of where trees are healthy and where they're not. It's almost, if you find a completely healthy stand of red cedar, that's almost as important, probably more important at this point, to figure out why are trees healthy there compared to these other places where here we're seeing all these trees with dead tops or thinning canopies or dead trees. But again, this updated last night and shows you that we really don't have much understanding of what's going on in this inland part of the West. So let's hop back to the presentation. So again, these kind of daily updated visualizations of what's happening with the red cedar, the iNaturalist data is available on this foresthealth.org/analyses. So earlier I mentioned that we have some other projects. Just wanted to again mention that there's a lot of projects. Our focus is mostly on Western red cedar, but we have a project on bigleaf maple and Douglas fir and hemlock, and these others are pretty new. So I welcome you to help shape them, join us in making them useful. But yeah, right now the most pressing issue is this Western red cedar issue. But then, yeah, if you're willing, in 2021, we're going to collect soils. In this fall, we're going to start collecting soils under healthy and unhealthy red cedars to look for differences in the fungal communities. Do healthy red cedars have a mycorrhizal species that unhealthy trees don't have? Or is there a root disease that's present in unhealthy trees and not healthy trees, right? So we can start to look at those questions a little more. And I think we have a little funding to cover the costs of sending a soil sample to us. But if this is of interest to you, then please stay in touch. So now I just have about 5 more slides to show you how this data will be useful. How will the iNaturalist project help us keep Western red cedar on our landscapes? One is giving us an idea of where trees are healthy and where they're not. So it's giving us a good understanding, oh my gosh, Western red cedar is unhealthy in Portland all the way to Vancouver. What's going on across this entire region. But still, we don't know what's going on where you all are at. It's also helping us identify where, site conditions where trees may be vulnerable. However, this is pretty limited because we don't have that many observations yet. When you break it down to the trees with dead tops, there's not that many. There's maybe 80 or 100. Same with if you break it down to the trees that are thinning. So we don't have much confidence with this kind of information yet, but we will by the time, if we can reach our goal of 2,000 trees. But once we start to understand where trees are vulnerable, then we can start to figure out what populations might be best tolerate and most suitable for those conditions. We also want to do overlays with environmental parameters to help determine which parameters best explain where trees are dying. Is it temperature or is it precipitation? Is it, which of those is the limiting factor for where trees are healthy? And once we do that, we can actually use these tools that are already developed and ready to go, for example, like the seed lot selection tool, which based on the environmental parameter that you're interested in planning with, you can identify areas where you should be collecting seed or planting seed from. So for example, Western Red Cedar, planting in Seattle, and maybe there are some locations in Montana that would be a good source population for planting in that when we're interested in this condition in kind of a current time period. What's cool about this tool is you can use climate projections and look at where should I get my seeds for this species in future climates. But the problem with this at this point is we don't know which environmental parameter is really the most important for determining whether that tree is going to be healthy or not. We need more information there. So again, once we've identified where trees are vulnerable and which environmental parameter is important, then we can start to screen different populations of red cedar against those conditions to try and find some populations that are going to be tolerant and better adapted to those conditions so that we can keep Western red cedar on the landscape. But that's all I was going to share. I just want to illustrate that this is a really urgent issue, and the best hope we have for finding solutions is if we can work together and engage more with folks like yourselves, and your perspectives are really, really important. As I've mentioned many times, we don't really understand what's going on at all, really, but especially in Western Montana. And knowing what's going on in Western Montana will be useful for understanding if this is a region-wide thing or a species-wide issue, or whether we could source populations from Western Montana to keep Western red cedar in other areas. So I encourage you, please feel free to engage. I'm gonna stop sharing. Feel free to contact me. My email is hulbert@wsu.edu. But yeah, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can have a little bit of a discussion. And I guess maybe should I stop recording as well, so we're all more comfortable chatting, or what would you?
Sure, that might be a good idea.